All the second stage tanks now pressurized. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
Can you believe our society was so superstitious, so backward, that we had witch hunts? Remember the outlaw lynchings of the Old West? The Prohibition era? The black lynchings of the Old South? The internment camps of World War II? Remember the McCarthy era? HBR Talk with Hannah Wallen. What is the common factor behind instances of social derangement, such as witch hunts? Why do we keep lapsing into the mentality of mob justice, despite the obvious lessons of each wave throughout history? The trigger in every example has been moral panic. The society of the time deemed a particular belief or idea so sacred as to outweigh all other standards and principles our society holds dear, enough to warrant total disregard for the humanity of the target of their panic, in fact. Each instance involved a departure from the existing standards for fair treatment and an abandonment of any sense of community between those caught up in the growing panic and anyone perceived to be in the target group. This is fueled by hasty generalizations wherein any undesirable trait exhibited by one member of the target group is presumed to be characteristic of every member of that group. Vulnerability is attributed to the panicked group, and power to the target group. An accountability gap manifests, with the panicked group becoming less accountable for any results of their actions, and the target group becoming the dumping ground for any slack that creates. A threat narrative is built around the target group. Social and political issues or other threats to society are attributed to it, to excuse presuming all members of it dangerous to those involved in the moral panic. Shame and guilt are heaped upon those in the target group, and they are alienated from their peers. This acclimates the panicked population to disregard the human rights of the target group. They become willing to condone or even promote the imposition of standards, rules, and regulations upon the group that don't apply to everyone else. Within the frame of that descent into judgmentalism and prejudice, it becomes easy to view seriously unjust treatment of individuals from the target group as a justified response to their reprehensibly aberrant nature. After all, the panicked population has a right to feel safe, don't they? And they wouldn't have to do this if the target group would learn to be better. We look back at past instances of moral panic with righteous disdain. Boy, were the people who got caught up in those events irrational. That could never happen today, could it? After all, we've learned our lesson from the many instances of genocide this kind of prejudice has incited in various nations throughout history. We all know better than to let that happen here, now, right? Don't be too sure of that. This week, we got to listen to feminists and their allies in politics tell us that, outside of a courtroom, it's perfectly acceptable for women to use uncorroborated allegations of intimate partner and sexual violence to destroy every aspect of a man's life, because the one consequence he won't face from the ordeal is jail. We got to hear them use the word credible over and over to describe a vague, unsupported, ever-changing narrative that has been repeatedly contradicted by evidence. Lack of evidence, we're told, does not discredit an accuser. It is irrelevant, we're told, if multiple witnesses counter her description of the character of the accused. The accusation itself doesn't even have to be sufficiently detailed, stating when or where the alleged crime is supposed to have happened. In fact, there can even be some physical evidence against the allegation, and the existence of the allegation itself still must be treated as a serious character flaw in the accused man, so much so that it alone is a valid reason to end his career, destroy his reputation, even stalk and harass his innocent family members, including his underage children. His outraged objection to being so maligned is treated as evidence of guilt, as are his declarations of innocence and his attempts to stave off treatment of the possibility that intoxication might have made his memory unreliable as proof of guilt. The accused is required to become the media lynch mob's boogeyman, regardless of the facts, and you're a rape apologist and a reprobate if you remind them that this man is a human being with human rights, just like those of his accuser. I've watched on social media as ordinary citizens, both left and right, who have not been involved with the men's rights movement, express their shock and dismay at the circus we're watching take place around the nomination of Judge Brett Kavanaugh to the U.S. Supreme Court. Many of them are wondering, how the hell did we get here? Why the sudden abandonment of a tried and true standard for fair dealing? The presumption of innocence has always been a fundamental tenet of the American justice system, not just because our forefathers said so, but because it is a human rights abuse to punish the innocent for crimes they did not commit. The only way to avoid this is to require proof of guilt before such punishment can be imposed. This is an age-old social standard as well, for the same reason. One that, if violated, has been historically demonstrated over and over to lead to hysteria, injustice, societal instability, and eventually reprehensible violations of human rights standards. Feminists played a long game to get our society to this point, with an entire sex as the target group. Long before #MeToo, before we were admonished to teach men not to rape, before masculinity was labeled restrictive or even toxic, there was feminist rape culture theory. This belief presumes rape to be pervasive and normalized in our society due to common attitudes about gender and sexuality. It relies heavily on that dynamic of vulnerability versus power, and a wide accountability gap between the sexes, particularly in regard to personal boundaries. These prejudices originated in existing gender roles and stereotypes upon which, despite claiming to reject them, feminists actually rely. In order for feminism's so-called rape culture to exist, there must be a stark gender difference in the value and validity of one's sexuality, and in particular, one's desire for sex, and one's competence to be considered fully responsible for one's sexual choices. As with past moral panics, feminism's rape culture theory presumes women, the panicked population, less competent to take that responsibility, and therefore less accountable for themselves in the context of a heterosexual encounter. Conditions and circumstances presumed to absolve a woman of accountability for her sexual choices do not mitigate a man's accountability. In fact, a man can be presumed more culpable for his choices made while drunk than a woman can for hers made while sober, both in terms of establishing and enforcing her own boundaries and respecting his. These expectations and beliefs rely on the existing protective attitude society has toward women, and the existing demand men face to fill the role of protector. Feminists both do and do not acknowledge the female gatekeeper, male seeker gender dynamic in heterosexuality. Though they deny its validity, their dogma relies on it, with every admonition presuming any encounter to be initiated by the man and either wanted or unwanted by the woman, with unwanted being the default, of course, regardless of her actions, unless she states otherwise. She is never responsible for his interest, regardless of whether she has put effort into attracting it or not. She is, after all, the vulnerable party in the encounter, regardless of all circumstances. If a question comes up involving female initiation, any male rejection of it is portrayed as abuse. When a man is the target of a woman's sexual advances, he is considered responsible for her interest in him, even if he has done nothing at all to try to attract it. He is, after all, the party with the power in the encounter, regardless of all circumstances. Sound familiar so far? The movement began attempting to impose these conditions on society decades ago, pushing their manufactured moral panic with a combination of existing social norms, feminist dogma, computative chicanery, and propaganda. Part of this was done through writing like Susan Brown Miller's book, Against Our Will, Men, Women, and Rape, in which she described women's social position as that of men's property, and sexual violence as men's go-to method of keeping said property in line. Feminists cited this and other feminist dogma as evidence while lobbying Congress to gender federal law governing law enforcement's response to intimate partner and sexual violence during the 70s. Their chicanery consisted of manipulating research methods and data assessment to obtain inflated rape statistics without showing gender parity in perpetration. During the mid to late 80s, numerous feminists were attempting to achieve this goal using a variety of manipulations. One woman's method in particular won the approval of feminist publisher Gloria Steinem, who promoted her work in Ms. Magazine. Mary P. Koss's survey was designed to override the respondent's agency by applying a feminist-approved label to her description of her experience rather than asking direct questions and logging direct answers. Koss's survey questions themselves were vague, open to loose interpretation, and worded specifically to include unplanned consensual encounters. These included things like, "Did you ever have sex when you didn't want to because a man gave you alcohol?" A sentence designed to get yes answers from active participants in drunken sex acts, whether they were severely inebriated or barely affected, and whether they were unwilling but unable to refuse, or had simply changed their minds. If the woman answered yes, that was counted as a rape. Approximately 3/4 of Koss's respondents disagreed with her assessment of their experiences, and nearly half of them went on to have sex with their alleged assailants again. But this did not stop feminists from citing her research as evidence that 1/4 of women are raped by the time they graduate college. At the same time, academic feminists were promoting their narrative with name-and-shame protests called Take Back the Night rallies, while expanding their university-sanctioned propaganda class, Women's Studies, into a full course of study in order to indoctrinate as many students as possible with that victim narrative. This process led to an extreme polarization of sexual conduct standards and a demonization of men in general as sexual predators. The very nature of sexual violence has even been redefined. The standard used to be knowingly and deliberately contravening a victim's rejection of sexual advances and refusal of sexual interaction. Under feminism's guidance, this has been changed to remove perpetrator deliberateness and the victim's aversion as elements of the crime, with the wording "against the victim's will" removed and replaced by "without the victim's consent." This makes the accused responsible not just for his own intentional behavior, but also for what goes on in the accuser's head. Neither his intentions or her will matter. Under current standards, she's not responsible for establishing and communicating her boundaries. He is responsible for leading her through that process and for whatever feelings she has about it later on. This polarization, in turn, was used to push for the imposition of standards, rules, and regulations that apply only to men, presumably for women's protection. Male victims of female sexual predators, on the other hand, are out of luck. Koss's statistics in the women's studies victim narrative were used to promote gender discriminatory laws and policies such as the Violence Against Women Act and its updates, the application of Title IX to sexual misconduct allegations on university campuses, the Clary Act, the Education Department's 2011 Dear Colleague Letter Guidance, and the Campus Save Act. Under feminist influence, federal law has chipped away at such due process standards as the right to present exculpatory evidence, the right to the presumption of innocence, and reliance on corroborating evidence. Today, a preponderance of accusers even gets treated as a substitute for evidence, regardless of the individual credibility of their accusations. That's where #MeToo entered the picture, following the downfall of Harvey Weinstein, against whom a mix of some credible and some dubious allegations have been made. Promoted by a handful of feminist celebrities, the movement took off like a stampede of spooked cattle, trampling logic, reason, and consideration for victims of female perpetrators in its path. As during the 17th century witchcraft panic of Salem, Massachusetts, we have seen sexual assault allegations used as a political weapon and a social battering ram, scattering men's reputations and careers in their wake. An orgy of female victim signaling ensued on social media, with the few women who rejected the narrative vilified as traitors or accused of internalized misogyny. When the occasional woman is accused, her accountability is fodder for debate among Me Too supporters, and her accuser targeted with accusations of his own, including attention-seeking, financial interests, and political motivations. Of course, Judge Kavanaugh's accusers couldn't have any of those motivations, could they? Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 54, #MeToo and Feminism's Fading Credibility. I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with the lovely and intelligent Anna Cherry, undercover badger Andrew, still cleverly disguised as himself, and, at least for part of the show, she who must be obeyed, Karen Strawn, to take another look at #MeToo in light of recent events that have pushed the feminist rape culture narrative, female perpetration, male victims, and false allegations out into the public sphere of awareness. Normies are discussing them, and people on all sides of the discussion are pissed off. So, of course, we are here to discuss that as well. But first, you gotta listen to an announcement and a shill. Sorry, guys. I'm moving to a different part of the Dayton metro area, so HBR Talk has to move to a different time, of course, but not all that far. Beginning next week, and for the foreseeable future, the show will be an hour earlier at 7 p.m. Eastern instead of 8 p.m. It's almost like Badger savings time, except we're springing the show forward close to when it's usually time for everyone to set their clocks back. Sorry, y'all. I just had to be confusing because I'm a big meanie. Ask any Twitter feminist and they'll tell you. And speaking of shill, if you're on YouTube and it starts experiencing platform malfunction syndrome and it won't let you listen, we're also on Twitch and Facebook because you can't keep a good badger down even when she's moving, which sucks. If you want to catch our show in its audio format, remember to go to badgerfeed.com and register to receive notifications so you'll know about them. You want to be sure you'll always be able to catch our live streams, even though YouTube hates us and always has at least one of our channels in the gulag, and we're never going to get out of the gulag, guys. Then you need notifications from badgerfeed.com to tell you when we're on. And also, if you're listening on the main Honey Badger radio channel, please come over to the Badger live streams channel and subscribe, because this is where the live streams live. If you can hear us on both channels, but once the live stream has ended, it'll only be available on Badger live streams. And in reference to the aforementioned gulag, you can't super chat us on Honey Badger Radio right now, because that channel is the one that's in the gulag. So if you plan to send us things to read on air during the show, you'll need to be on Badger live streams. And there's a link in the low bar of this stream on Honey Badger Radio. I'm not going to do that every week, but I figured that might make things easier for people this week. And last but not least, don't forget to like and share this and other Honey Badger live streams so they'll be seen by other people. Think of it as a chance to thumb your nose at the establishment. And with all of that all over, shall we move on to the topic of the main show, or main topic of the show, now that I've talked myself out of breath. So what do you guys think? Have you been following the Senate circus this week?
I didn't want to, okay? I didn't even want to, but Medium, for instance, sent me a wall of articles, which I'd like to read some titles of later to show how all over the place they are trying to throw shit at the wall and see what sticks. It's quite a circus indeed.
Oh. Okay, so I watched the Christine Blasey Ford, Brett Kavanaugh hearing. I watched it all start to finish. I was transfixed by the vocal fry that was deployed. It's somebody described it, might have been even my daughter. That's the voice I use when I'm fake calling in sick to work.
Question on that, okay. Actually.
I'm just feeling so awful.
Yeah, that was a weird thing for me too, is that I did watch her testimony, and on one hand, her face was one way, but her voice was a different way, which just completely threw me off. But I did have a question about that, because as we saw, Fox News said that she had an extremely, emotionally wrought, just horrible. But then on the other hand, people are saying that she was extremely composed compared to Kavanaugh. So which one is it? Was she composed?
No, she was acting. Okay, she was acting because you know why? Because it's actually, unless you are a trained actor in the method, okay, it's really hard to summon up tears when you're not actually suffering an emotion that would bring you to tears, right? So, Brett Kavanaugh needed a tissue. After he said, and my daughter, Liza, all of 10 years old, and then he broke up and all that, and then he was sniffing the whole time after that and blew his nose after he was done, right? Christine Blasey Ford didn't require a single fucking tissue. She had no sniffles. Her voice was, I'm crying. But the whole thing just reminded me of my daughter at age, 5, trying to convince me to buy her gum. But Mom, I'm just gonna be so sad. Like that's what it was. It was a put on voice. It was designed to make her look small, vulnerable. She had her chin tucked into her chest for a lot of it, looking up over her glasses for a lot of it, and sort of in it's a neotenous pose, right? It's the pose that you're supposed to do if you're looking for dates on an app,
right? Looking up
as a woman,
yeah,
looking up, right? But it's not just looking. It's not just the presentation of looking up to someone and saying, I am vulnerable to you, which is what that signals, right? But it's also, it enhances the size of the forehead, the higher forehead, the largeness of the eyes, the shortness of the nose.
Minimizes the chin, makes the eyes bigger.
Yeah, all of that stuff, right? So it's a very childlike pose. And that it works for women when they're trying to get dates because, the younger, the better within reason for most guys, right? In terms of what they find attractive. But I mean, she was pulling that through the whole thing. And when she finished her testimony and didn't even pull out a tissue, who was
the real victim there in terms of emotionality? That's the weird thing to me too, is I got this editor's picks from Medium, Surviving in a Bad Man's World. I actually forwarded to Alison and whoever other badgers I had in my email. And there's a list of articles and their authors. And one is Kavanaugh is the Face of American Male Rage by Jessica Valenti. And it shows his little weasel expression that he was trying to do in order to stop himself from crying. Yeah. And then another article is Seeing Through Kavanaugh's Tears. Which one is it? Is he angry or is he crying? Come on, people.
And we're constantly told that men need to, show emotion and shit in order to, it's like, okay, so he's not allowed to show emotion when he's being falsely accused of, A, attempted rape, B, actual, gang rape.
Gang rape, yeah. No, and then also...
so he's not allowed to be pissed off?
No, but the bombshell, the real bombshell came was it yesterday or today, right? At some point in his college years, when he was at a bar, he threw ice at someone.
Oh, yeah, I saw that and I was like, what the fuck? Okay, so he threw ice instead of, punching or stabbing somebody?
We can forget about the attempted rape. We can forget about the gang rape thing. We can forget about him wagging his dick in some chick's face at Yale thing, right? Okay, he threw ice at someone. There is a police report. He was interviewed by police over this incident. Therefore, there's evidence that it happened. So let's just run with that.
Yeah, but you got to realize
that's about the only thing that they got on him.
He's obviously a hothead who can't be trusted.
Gotta realize the left wants to abolish ice, so ice is bad.
Do you know how many empty plastic pop bottles I have thrown at my boyfriend right?
Jeez.
When he's just been completely insufferable, they're like they just go boink off of his shoulder. You know, I usually throw them at the wall behind him, but I'm just like, oh my God, you're driving me crazy. Whang, right? It's an empty plastic pop bottle.
So if you get one of those ice trays that makes a whole bunch of little ice cubes that you can fill your glass with little ice cubes, and then what? Is that a salt ice?
Well,
it's easier
how
to
many
use
women,
a lot.
How many women throw? Actually, that's kind of a good.
How many women throw things at their partners in domestic violence?
Oh my God.
No.
Like
How many
heavy things?
Well, okay, no, but how many women throw a drink in a man's face?
Oh, they're encouraged to do that
for being insulting or whatever, right? I mean, you throw a drink, ice in it, maybe, yeah, I don't know, right?
Alcohol burns your eyes.
Or swat him with her purse, right?
Oh, yeah.
Or slap him in the shoulder, or whatever. Right? People get into altercations, people get into disagreements. You know what I would love to know? I would love to know if this altercation with him throwing ice at a man at a bar had to do with him defending the honor of a woman, because that would just be so fucking perfect, wouldn't
That'd be hilarious.
Oh my God, that would be.
You know, I had an ex-boyfriend whose ex-wife, when they were married, used to throw small appliances at him. Like the toaster.
Oh yeah, no,
she one time threw an iron skillet at him.
My God!
And he was the one that everybody was down on when they were divorced. She left him for another guy. This seems to be a pattern. I know lots of guys that this has happened to. She leaves for another guy and then accuses him of cheating. And so the idea of throwing something at an ice cube is not that big of a deal. There was also, he was interviewed about it, but there wasn't necessarily, nobody ever admitted that he actually did it. Just that he was accused of it and a bar fight started. Well, there's always, somebody has to have started a bar fight. Anytime there's a bar fight and the cops get involved, everybody accuses everybody else of starting it.
Yeah, of course.
Not that I've been in a lot of bar fights, but I have seen this happen. So the idea that there's a police report saying that somebody said Kavanaugh threw ice at somebody does not necessarily mean that Kavanaugh actually started a bar fight.
Yeah, no. I mean, like, you look at confrontations between men in public, right? And it usually involves a lot of chest beating and posturing and all of that stuff leading up, right? And sometimes, I'm going to poke you in the chest, right? A few times.
There's always some asshole at the bar that wants to start a fight with somebody, so.
Oh, or some guy whose woman wants him to start a fight with somebody, right?
Yeah, I've run into that too. All it takes is for something stupid to happen, like they're walking along and they step on your foot and all of a sudden you tripped them. Or, the ice cube didn't even have to be thrown. It could have been something else entirely. And all of a sudden there's an ice cube involved, and next thing you know, oh, he's throwing ice at me, I'm gonna knock him out, If somebody threw an ice cube at you in a bar, is that a reason to go over and hit them?
Yeah, well, if somebody threw an ice cube, if somebody threw an ice cube at you in a bar, is that a reason for him to be arrested for assault? Yeah. I mean, like, literally, technically under the law, my boyfriend assaulted me this morning because he was annoyed trying to get out of the door, and there was something in the way of it, and he kicked it, and he was expressing anger in my presence at the fact that I had left something in the way of the door.
Oh boy!
Right, and he
that's
kicked
it. You guys are just gonna have to. You're over for life now.
I'm looking at it. Okay, so that's about as sane as me being arrested and put in prison for throwing an empty freaking plastic pop bottle at him, in his general direction, and then he laughs about it, and then just keeps saying what he's saying that's making me mad, right? Because we're completely dysfunctional in some ways at some times.
But isn't everybody?
I think so, but it's like essentially, like, I'm not scared of him, he's not scared of me.
But feminists want you to be scared of each other.
And that's really what it is. Like, I would never throw anything that actually could injure him anywhere near him or at anything in my house. I spent hours and hours and hours, like hundreds of hours patching these walls. Why would I want to throw something that could put a chunk, take a chunk out of my wall?
See, that's too practical.
I would never, it's just not something that I would do. I like throw a Kleenex box or, and that's like, you want to express yourself, right? But you don't want to do any damage.
Karen, you have too much foresight and too much logic behind your actions. You must be a man.
Too much.
Far too much.
I guess, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm curious as to, because the FBI investigation finished up, and we all, obviously the Democrats weren't happy with it.
No, they demand this investigation, and when it finds nothing, what did they come out with? It's an FBI cover-up!
Well, they got annoyed that that the FBI didn't talk to Ford or Kavanaugh, but guess what? The FBI in that situation has less power than the Senate Judiciary
Than the Senate,
Committee.
yeah.
Yeah, so okay, so they're not going to tell them anything different. And guess what? There's been no corroboration for any of Ford's claims.
Yeah, so now they're going...
There's somebody that was trying to reach out to the FBI that they heard secondhand or something.
Hearsay.
That Kavanaugh was the person at the college thing, but then the person who told that second person says, "I don't remember that." So that's not helping the situation any.
No, they've got all kinds of stuff floating around like that.
The FBI could have done.
The thing that got me real quick is her attorneys set conditions on which she would be willing to provide evidence to the FBI.
Over to my part of the country every summer.
Well, our client will provide this evidence, this physical evidence that will prove her case, but only if you interview her. You're not entitled to do that. You're not entitled to tell law enforcement, I have this evidence and I will provide it to you if you do what I want. But if you don't do what I want, you can't have the evidence. You're not entitled to
the therapy notes. The therapy notes is what we're talking about.
Grassley has repeatedly requested the therapist records and
the polygraph, which is even more important nowadays. The fact that apparently she lied about helping people take a polygraph.
Yeah. But not just the report, not just the report itself, but the actual readouts and the all of the timestamps and everything of the questions and all of those things, right? And what the questions were and any recordings of it. And so, I mean, he's requested these things before. This is not the first time that he has requested these things. But he hasn't subpoenaed her yet.
Right. And the funny thing is all of this is, the public is watching all of this and they're seeing all this. So the accuser has evidence that the accuser says proves her case and is refusing to turn it over to the authorities that she's trying to prove her case
it's
to.
It's absurd.
And people are asking, if she has this evidence proves her case, why won't she turn this over? I'm seeing people asking questions like this. I'm seeing people starting to become aware that, hey, this is kind of off. There is something wrong with this.
It's a little hinky. Yeah.
And then, of course, the response they're getting is great. People who push #MeToo, people who push #BelieveHer, people who push the idea that if an accusation has been made, the accused must be guilty, are responding to people asking these rational questions, these very simple, easy to answer rational questions with misogynist, you hate women, shame. And it's great.
You hate rape victims and
it's affecting people's opinions dramatically.
Oh yeah, no, I think this is going to backfire. I'm really hoping it backfires for the Democrats because, it's Kavanaugh called them on it, and he called them on it brilliantly, right? That this is a political hit. That's all it is. I have answered more questions than all other Supreme Court justices nominees combined. Right?
Yep.
Combined. I have released more documents than the last 5 Supreme Court nominees who made it to the bench combined. Right? I have cooperated in every single fucking way, right? You couldn't get me on any, and I was watching portions after the fact, right after the Blasey Ford Kavanaugh hearing. I watched portions of the initial hearings, and they were trying to get him to, will you or will you not recuse yourself on such and such a case? Will you or will you not recuse yourself on some other kind of case? And he's saying, I'm not going to say either way because that would be a violation of my judicial independence.
Yep. They were trying to board him.
If I say I will recuse or that I won't recuse, either way, I'm making a commitment in violation of my independence as a judge.
Yeah. The Ginsburg rule. That's all I'm going to say.
I want to one other thing. As far as Democrat and Republicans concerned, I want to make a real quick disclaimer here because I've been talking about this online and everything, but as far as Brett Kavanaugh goes, he was a Bush guy. He was part of the investigation into Clinton and everything, and I was kind of lukewarm on him as a nominee in general. Like I think.
Compared to
I wasn't
the other
excited.
ones, yeah.
I wasn't excited about this nominee.
Well, because
he's kind
had
of
stuff regarding the Fourth Amendment.
Right. He's kind of an establishment Republican. So that part of it, I'm not. As far as getting him in there because of his political affiliations, as far as I'm concerned, screw that. I'm not real happy about that. I'm not particularly upset about it either. But
I'm really glad you brought that up. Hannah.
What really made me enthusiastic about this is, okay, so you've got him and you've got Clarence Thomas now that have both been through ordeals during their nominations that make them very much aware of the value and importance of due process. That makes me want him to get in. But aside from that, as far as the nominee is concerned, I wouldn't have been extraordinarily supportive of this guy until this happened. Anna, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I'm really glad you bring that up because that's what I wanted to mention. That I, even though I am a registered Democrat at the moment, there's really no other, nothing really is tying me to that party anymore. But I will say that I fundamentally disagree with most Republican values, not of course to speak of the policies. So I would not want someone who would want to institute abortion penalties in the Supreme Court at all whatsoever. I don't want Republicans or Democrats at this point anywhere near the Supreme Court. However, watching this hearing, I was actually heartened to hear him say that he is the look on the sunrise side of the mountain kind of guy, that he is, an optimist, and that he mentioned things that really made him seem like he would be more of an impartial judge than I'm used to out of a Republican side of things, or Democrat for that matter. So if anything, this hearing, what it did for me is highlight something that I would have written off just simply based on party affiliation. But because this happened, we got to hear more about his personal stance on things, and that made me actually feel better about him as a candidate as well. But we're talking about here a polygraph test, and that's pretty much the only proof that she has is her recollection and this polygraph test that is not being revealed. So,
and the testimony of and her husband saying that that she said that it was him or whatever.
Right, and the best one of her friends who said
back in 2012 though, she named him, which was when Brett Kavanaugh was all over the news.
Right.
There you go. And of course, there's the friend too who was like, "Oh, I believe her. That's how it happened." Except when she was called to testify, she's like, "Oh, wait, shit, no, I can't back that up. I'm not going to testify." So that's interesting.
I don't know who the fuck this guy
Well,
is.
she didn't say the friend didn't say I believe her 100%. What she said was when she heard the actual details of the allegation, she was like, "Oh, well, that isn't what I remember, and I have no knowledge of any of this, but I still believe her."
Right. So on that note, let me introduce some neuroscience here and psychology. So she is a psychology professor herself, which I find to be not suspect in the slightest. But, we have this thing where this happened, 30 years ago? So
36 years ago.
All right. So we have a study here that from UC Irvine neurobiologist Zachariah Reek and Michael Yassa, who found that repetition does enhance factual content of memories, but it reduces the amount of details stored in those memories, and repeated recall, which has repeated recalling of an event, nuances fade away. So any kind of nuanced, small details, little things that could have made the case go one way or the other, with repeated recollection, that starts to fade away. Now, not only that, but memory is not simply an image produced by time traveling back to the original event. It can be an image that is distorted because of the prior times you remembered it. So there is a study by Donna Bridge from the Northwestern University Feinberg School of Medicine, and the lead author of the paper that was published in Journal of Neuroscience, mentioned that your memory of an event can grow less precise to the point of being totally false with each retrieval. Now,
yeah, you don't just watch the video again. You edit it every time.
And you remember the edits. And with each subsequent edit, it's like a game of telephone. You remember each new changed version.
Edit, yeah.
In my experience, you can also conflate traumatic memories with each other, because I wrote about my first asthma attack several years ago. I still remember things from my first, not my first asthma attack, but my first near-death asthma attack. I was only 18 months old.
Memory. Yeah. You remember where you were, what you were doing, kind of thing.
Right. I remember very specific things. I don't remember the whole thing, because I was like 18 months old when it happened. You don't usually remember things from that age, but when you almost suffocate to death, it sort of burns things into your brain.
Stress and trauma does burn in memory. Sure.
But my memory conflated it with the time when I was 4 years old and I went into anaphylactic shock from a penicillin shot, and I almost died then too. And there were things I remembered from that I have always thought happened during that first asthma attack. My mother had to explain to me, no, those were two separate events that were, a couple of years apart from each other. So
you almost died twice.
Yeah, well, that was the first 2 times of several. So it's my hobby.
I have with you. I completely understand that.
Doesn't seem to take with you, then.
Yeah, well, it's just we have this game of tag. But anyway, so it's possible that she has done that as well.
And not to mention that we have actually a PubMed study that concluded that when alcohol is involved, which of course, are we to assume that everyone was drinking except Christine? Was she the only?
I think
she said she remembered she had one beer.
Sure, that's all she remembered, because after that she blacked out. But point is, alcohol does. The conclusion of this study in particular says that alcohol appears to lead to decline in false memories. However, it also, effect of alcohol decreases rejection of false memories. So if you have false memories, normally you would be able to realize that, oh no, I confabulated that isn't actually real. However, alcohol or which has to do with, I believe liver is involved somehow, because there are issues, I believe it's called Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, that has nothing to do with alcoholics, but it also, there are some things that they share together with alcoholism. Wernicke-Korsakoff and alcoholism, they are similar in some ways in the way they impact the body, and both of them result in confabulated memories. So the brain has a hard time rejecting false memories under the influence of alcohol. And we have this Guardian article where neuroscientists talk about Elizabeth Loftus. She's a total badass who brought up eyewitness testimony and how not credible it is, and how easily you can lead someone by just saying, do you remember a flashlight versus do you remember the flashlight? So the lawyer or the prosecutor who's cross-examining, they very easily can lead into an eyewitness into remembering something that didn't exist simply by switching that word from a to the. So this was a really great Guardian article that talked about "We Can Implant Entirely False Memories" is the title of it. And it was Alan Alda, who was a Hawkeye from MASH. He went into University of California at Irvine, once again, and they made him remember things that didn't happen. And this was part of a TV science series that went into how easily can we do this, and turns out very easily. Not only is there actual conflation of real memories with false ones based on how many times you repeated over a period of 30 however many years, then there's also alcohol preventing rejection of false memories. And we have straight up introduction of false memories based on, somebody introducing it to you in a very, very simple way that was easily shown on TV to be done to a TV actor. So it's a lot of stuff there to contend with.
There's all the more reason why evidence is vital in any kind of a criminal case, and any time that we're going to apply any kind of penalty to somebody on the basis of somebody else's accusation, even if it's just, this person doesn't deserve their job or they're going to get fired. And then this argument, it's not a criminal case, really doesn't matter to me. I worked in retail for combined probably close to 20 years. And one of the problems that retail workers face is there is an under-the-radar system that's kind of like a credit reporting system, except your employer can put your name, it's more like the sex offender list, except for basically misappropriation of different types. So your employer can put your name on a list of people who have stolen from their employers or otherwise stolen, like from consumers, from each other, whatever, in the workplace. And you have no recourse because you won't even know it's there. You just know all of a sudden you can't get another job because the people that you're applying with will be checking this list, and if you're on it, they're not going to hire you. And I can't remember what it's called anymore. There was actually a poster up about it at my workplace. My workplace was at least honest. My last retail workplace was at least honest enough to tell people that this would happen if they got caught stealing in the workplace. But there are some places that will report to this organization that don't even let their employees know they are at risk for that. And so you don't get a notification that you have been put on this list. There's no due process, there's no hearing, there's no nothing. Your employer just says, this person is a thief, and you're labeled a thief. So that in and of itself can have very serious consequences in a person's life. That you're on that list for 7 years. For 7 years, you can't get a job. And for 7 years, you don't know why you can't get a job. You don't have any way of contesting it. And now you have a 7-year gap in your work history. And there's no criminal trial there. You're not going to jail. And according to these people's logic, well, that's not a big deal. Maybe you're homeless, but that's all right. You didn't go to jail, right? So I as far as the argument that if it's just a job application and not a criminal trial, that has no bearing to me on whether or not evidence matters. Evidence is the most important thing. If the evidence does not back up the accusation, if there's no corroborating witnesses, if there's nothing to back up the accuser's story, then you cannot use the accusation as an excuse to apply a penalty to an individual, even if that penalty is just, you don't get this particular job. And this is a hell of a job to tell somebody they can't get. Before we go on... Well, you can respond, and then after Karen, I'm going to catch up on the super chats because we're starting to get a lot.
I think the most important thing to realize here, and I'm just gonna take a moment to squirt my dog. With
no
the
doggy process either.
But essentially, what we have here is a situation where if Kavanaugh does not get confirmed, it's going to essentially make this farce business as usual. And the Republicans will probably not do it for a while, right? The Democrats will continue to do it. They'll do it with the next nominee. If Kavanaugh crashes, right, there's going to be another nominee, and the Democrats will take him down with a sexual assault allegation or something like that as well, a Me Too allegation. But eventually the Republicans will catch on, and then what do we have? A system where nobody can hold public office because anybody can make an allegation. Anybody who doesn't like them or their politics or their policy, right, can make an allegation and essentially make that person into an unperson in terms of public service.
And you know what'll happen
really
after
what
that.
We're going to have.
You know what'll happen after that. Everybody complains about the idea of a woman needing 4 witnesses to back her accusations. How do you think that ended up happening in Islamic countries that are ruled by Sharia law? How do you think they got to that point? Do you think they got to that point because somebody just sat down one day and said, you know what, we just shouldn't believe anything women say because, men are honorable, but women are liars? Because I don't think they did. I don't think somebody just sat down and decided that. I think there were experiences that their society went through at different times, and they turned around and went, you know what, we have to have significant corroboration before we put a guy to death because a woman said that he raped her, or before we force a guy to get married because a woman said that he raped her. I think that I don't agree with the solution. I don't think but they do it the other way around too. If you accuse a woman of infidelity or of fornication, I guess it's called, you have to have 4 witnesses too. And that probably is because those types of allegations had become a weapon in a society that has strict attitudes towards sex and sexuality. Whether we judge them as too strict or not, that's up to you. I have my own opinions on that, and I think everybody's entitled to their opinion on it. But I think that requirement of 4 witnesses for accusing either a man or a woman of their particular gendered violations of their strict sexual codes probably came from people figuring out that they could use those as weapons against each other, both socially and legally. And because sex
happens in private, so it's so really hard to prove that it happened, but it's really hard to prove that it didn't happen.
And part of my reason for believing that is because it gets done here. It's being done here and now. This is not the only thing. This is the public becoming aware of it. But I mean, in the men's rights movement, we've seen this for years. We've been talking about this stuff for years. It's awful to see this man going through this. It's awful to see any man going through this. But it's very gratifying to see the public becoming aware of it and the public becoming outraged over it and going, what the hell happened? But before we go on, I really do want to get to those super chats.
And we're saying, like, okay, you're saying how did we get here? Well, I could tell you.
Yeah.
I could tell you how we got here.
I've actually been explaining that to a lot of people. I've had some interesting DMs. So our super chats, we have Felicia Bryant gave us $10 and said, I appreciate hearing your side of the argument. I think I'm a lot like Sargon. He is a left-winger who criticizes the left to improve it. And I am a feminist that criticizes various kinds of feminism. Felicia Bryant, I recommend reading everything Christina Hoff Sommers has ever written. You'll find that you'll find a kindred spirit if you are a feminist that criticizes feminism. She considers herself an equity feminist, not a gender feminist. So that kind of helps.
There's a great talk by Just Butcher. It's a TEDx, I believe, where she is talking about if feminism is starting to undermine itself. And I do, since you mentioned liberals who criticize the left to improve it, I'm going to put my tin fedora on for just a sec here and postulate that we are seeing the events develop as they are in order to maximize the hysteria that the left is capable of, in order to make everyone feel like liberal values are trash. And I think that's the real psyop.
There's something to that. Now, this is something that I always differentiate. There's liberal values, which are, don't be an asshole, basically. Liberal values in general boil down to don't be an asshole, or if you're going to be an asshole, don't be a systematic asshole. And then there's progressivism.
Hannah?
Huh?
Hannah?
Yes.
I want to interrupt.
Well,
I want to interrupt.
I'm going to finish this.
I want to interrupt for some breaking news.
Quit interrupting me.
Breaking news.
Progressivism is an entirely different story.
Thing?
What's the breaking news?
The breaking news is, you know who Scott Adams is, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so 5 years ago or so, he wrote a blog post essentially mocking and dismissing men's rights activists as losers.
Mm-hmm.
Now he just sent out a tweet 7 hours ago. If men take Senator Hirono's advice to shut up and step up, it's going to be an interesting midterm election. Be careful what you wish for. #misandry.
So that's as close as we're probably going to get from him to you guys were right. But society is becoming red-pilled.
It is.
That is a very gratifying thing to see. But I'm going to go on with this. Progressive, like the early 20th century progressivism is very much like the far religious end of the religious right. Not like genuine traditionalists, but neocon traditionalists, the ones that basically want to judge you in the bedroom and judge you in the bar and so on. And it's the difference is that the progressive end of the left wants to judge you genetically, and they want to judge your associations, and they want to judge your financial success. And so I don't consider that to be the same thing as a liberal. And I don't. My family that are Democrats are the former. They are liberals. They are the different strokes for different folks. Don't discriminate against people on the basis of their immutable characteristics. Men and women should be treated equally under the law. All of those things. And then I have one family member who is a progressive of the 1904 variety, as Hillary Clinton put it. And that's an entirely different thing, and it's a very stark difference. And I don't like to unilaterally condemn the left, because just like on the right, there's not just one left.
Well, for sure. And the thing is, Democrats are not even liberal anymore. The jumping of the shark for me was the fact that every Democrat except Bernie Sanders and 8 Republicans voted for the massively bloated war budget that Trump has proposed. So what is even going on anymore?
Yeah, Democrats used to protest against every war, and all of a sudden now they're for one. So I think, where did that come from? But yeah, so that's where, when it comes down to liberal left and right, there's bad things on both sides. There's good things on both sides, and it's up to the individual to pay attention. You go with the issues. I don't worry about the labels and everything so much. If I have to be labeled, I'm probably on the cusp between a libertarian and traipsing off into Incapistan territory. I'm so fed up with authoritarian government on both sides. Like the right had their prohibitions, the left have their prohibitions, and they're both creating organized crime. They're both creating increases in death and poverty, destruction, war. It never seems to work out. So, I told somebody yesterday or today online. I can't remember whether it was before I left for work or after midnight. But I told somebody government doesn't solve problems. They were talking about, well, what problems has the government solved under this administration or under that administration? Government doesn't solve problems. It never solves problems. Government creates problems. Government creates the illusion of problems, and government funds problems, but it doesn't solve problems. People solve problems. Government just gets out of the way or gets in the way, and that's the only things that it can do in terms of problem solving. So and that's my little spiel. So you can see where I am. I'm not coming at this as a staunch Republican, supporter that thinks Kavanaugh's great because he was nominated by a Republican. I'm coming at this as a due process advocate who was really, really lukewarm at best about this nominee until he got falsely accused and went through hell for it. And now I'm like, yep, this guy is going to be a due process defender if he gets on the Supreme Court. And whatever else, we're not going to get a perfect judge on the Supreme Court, but this is one issue that's very important to me. And so I hope he gets in just because of that. Next super chat, we have, let's see, because we did Felicia Bryant's super chat. Troy Davidson gave us US $2 and said, I just wanted to say hi. Notice me, Badger Senpais. And you have been noticed, Troy. Albert Nada gave us $2 Canadian, said, believe all women. 2 words. Emmett Till. Look it up. I think we've talked about Emmett Till quite a bit in terms of various issues on the show. So
we have. I think there's another 2 words that we could say. It's 2 sets of 2 words that are synonymous. Atticus Finch and rape culture.
Yeah.
They are one and the same thing. That rape apologist Atticus Finch, who was a rape apologist and allowed wasn't quite able to allow a black man to get away with it.
There we
go. And of course, from personal experience, when even though you're adamantly against the exact person who's being accused, but if you say that believe all women equals guilty and never proven innocent in the court of public opinion, you're also a rape apologist. I was fucking news to me.
Yeah. And one other thing on the believe women front and the idea of a delay in the Republicans doing it. It's impossible for there to be a delay in the Republicans doing it because they did it when Clinton was accused. Now there were some accusations that were definitely more credible than the accusations that are occurring now, but the degree of investigation into them prior to Republicans coming out and treating them all as 100% proved was nil. Okay, so and I was more of a staunch Republican at that time. And at that time, I had a lot more conversations where people were I was about the same age as Monica Lewinsky. I was in my 20s when that happened, and people were portraying her as a victim and everything, and I kept talking about, but you're saying girls my age are not adults, and girls my age are not capable of making their own sexual choices. And then the answer was, but he's in his 50s. Well, do you become more adult as you get older? Are there civil rights that should be, maybe withheld from people that are in their 20s that you can't get till you're in your 30s or 40s, besides being able to run for president, because you can't do that till you're 35? But I mean, should there be laws that say, you can't have this type of job or that type of job until you're a certain age because you're not really a full adult until you're over 30? Because if not, then it's really condescending to call Monica Lewinsky a victim of anything. But the Republicans have been calling her a victim for over 20 years.
Oh yeah. And, like Monica Lewinsky was like, okay, number 1, I was not a victim. But number 2, I was vilified by feminists.
Yeah, she was. She was a victim of that.
By them.
But she wasn't a victim of Bill Clinton.
No. And, so she's as she came out just like since Me Too,
and now she's
said,
acting like she was.
now now that I've really thought about it, now that I've had like 20 years to think about it, yeah, I was a victim. And he totally violated me. And yeah, I had no agency in that situation. And all the feminists were right.
Yeah, she went there to get, what was it? She said she went there to get her presidential wings or something like that. That there was, like, she talked about this at the time as a conquest, a successful conquest. And this is like that's one of the things.
So did one of Julian Assange's accusers.
Yeah.
Bragging at a party to other people, saying, "Oh yeah, I bagged him. I totally bagged him." And then
I bagged this famous guy.
Finding out later that the next night he banged some other chick, and then she was like, "Oh yeah, no, this is embarrassing."
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is one of those things. This is not something that just the Democrats do, but it is definitely like the general public is going to lose their tolerance for this real fast. And
I hope. But you know, like it took how many lynchings did it take for America to wake up and say, okay, well, you know, maybe due process and the presumption of innocence don't unfairly advantage black defendants who were accused of raping white women.
Well, actually, you had two different groups of people involved there. You had the people who were trying to maintain a status quo, and you had the people who were trying to pull the country out of it. So half of the public actually was aware of that, and then part of the public was, you know, they were bigots. So whether they were aware of it or not, they didn't care about it. But going on, we have. Let's see, I read Robert T. Longway gave us US $20 and said, I want Kavanaugh in only to prevent rewarding the tantrums currently being thrown. Also, this proves that many of those opposed to Trump don't care what kind of Republican someone is. They hate you anyway, because Kavanaugh is a Bush Republican. And, you know, right on both counts, we don't want to open the door to this being done all the time. We want to close the door by seeing it not rewarded with a win for the people who are trying to use this to keep a person out of office. Frenchinator 2 gave us US $2 and said, men and women are not equal, so how does that work? I'm not sure which area of equality you're talking about.
Depends on your definition of equal, of equal value in terms of their humanity, how their humanity should be valued. Equal in terms of, you know, deserving of human decency and courtesy. Sure. You know, but equal in terms of competence, ability, personality, preference, all of those things? No.
Guess you could call me a minimalist on that. In my opinion, if we're going to have a law that requires something of people, there shouldn't be an exemption for gender or race or anything like that. I can see handicaps being an exemption for things that handicaps would interfere with. Aside from that, being a woman doesn't make you handicapped. So, you know, if there's going to be a law that's going to require things of people, if you got to pay taxes, you got to pay taxes. If you have to stop at a stop sign, you have to stop at a stop sign. If you're not allowed to infringe on somebody else's boundaries, then it shouldn't matter what sex you are. If there's a law that's forbidding people from doing something, it shouldn't apply to just one sex. You know, but at the other end of it, I don't think we have to pass laws. We don't have to have laws to say you have to have the same number of men and women in your workplace. You have to have the same number of men and women in charge in your workplace.
Oh, God.
That's not equality. That's interference in people's relationship with their employer and people's life choices, people's lifestyle choices, and everything like that. That's an entirely different story. French Honey Badger gave us US $5 and said, Democrats only protest wars when Republicans start them. The Democrat anti-war movement disappeared as soon as Obama was elected. And that's true. And I think there were Republicans protesting Obama's military actions as well. And there were Republicans that protested Bill Clinton's military actions. So the anti-war thing is kind of also disapproval of the other side's choices. Daniel Patterson gave us US $5 and said, "Big oof, I just want everyone to know life sucks ass and everyone in it does too." I think there's a lot of good things about life, but there's a lot of things that we have to deal with. And I guess I would put it this way, okay? We always hear about the the pessimist and the optimist in terms of the glass being half empty and the glass being half full. And then there's a third attitude that you can have toward life it's my kind of optimism. My kind of optimism is we've got some work to do to get this glass filled the rest of the way up.
My kind of optimism is actually a little bit minimalist. It's the glass is actually half as big as it needs to be.
You mean twice as big as it needs to be?
Oh, yeah. Twice as big, sorry.
It's entirely possible.
So,
some situations, that's the truth. But if you look at a glass and you see that it has half the liquid in it that you think it should have in it, the answer is we've got some work to do to get this glass filled the rest of the way up. You can also look at a situation and see that the glass has the right amount of liquid and it just looks bad because you've got a big glass.
Or the glass is either half full, half empty, or is being raped.
Yep, the glass is being raped. That's the feminist outlook. The glass is being raped.
Or look at it this way. You could say the glass is only half full. Okay. Only half full. That means that it's lacking, right? Or you could say the glass is only half empty, which means that it's not lacking. It's not all bad.
Right. So when we look at things, I don't like to look at the fact that there's always going to be stuff that sucks in life. And there's always going to be stuff that's great. And only focusing on the stuff that sucks, no, it's not for me. And if there's a lot of stuff that sucks, my answer is, what are we going to do about it?
What doesn't kill you makes you stranger.
Yeah, well, there's also the D&D answer to the glass analogy. Roll a d20 to see how drunk you get after you drink it. But Mr. Roboto gave us US $2 and said the ultimate monster Me Too plus feminism is me feminist. And
yeah.
Oh, and I want to bring up one other thing because I've seen this today and decided it really needed to be added to the discussion because hashtag Me Too really started because of the Weinstein thing. So I'm going to really quick, I'm not going to read this whole story, but I'm going to go over it a little bit. Charges in
Kavanaugh wrote a response in the Washington WSJ, whatever the
Wall Street Journal.
Yeah, he wrote I am an independent, impartial judge. Yes, I was emotional last Thursday. I hope that everyone can understand I was there as a son, husband, and dad. And then he actually has a opinion article.
Well, that is good. Then people can read his explanation as to what he was going through on the stand. You know, this is something else. The idea that he's not supposed to have any kind of emotional response to what was being done to him.
It's nuts.
It's nuts. It'd be like somebody coming in to testify in court after they were raped, and they get on this stand, and they instead of sounding like God, now I just have a blank on his accuser's name. That's awful. But instead of sounding like her, Instead of sounding like Ford, you know, they sound like I would sound if I got a chance to sit in a courtroom. In a witness stand and accuse my perpetrator right there in the courtroom in front of a judge and a jury, I would be leaning forward, pointing my finger, going, "He did this to me," or "She did this to me," and there I don't necessarily look sad. I get angry about stuff like that. I'm outraged over what happened to me. Not so much today as I was at the time. You know, pain fades with time, but this was not just a scary moment. This was a how dare you moment, and it's perfectly acceptable to sit in court when you have been wronged, or to sit in any situation that is like court when you have been wronged, and basically be prepared to look at the person who wronged you and say, you know, screw you, you know, shame on you for what you did, and point the finger and be angry, frown, and so on. But I do want to add in the Weinstein stuff to this, because this is actually, there's some interesting turns in that case. There was the one accuser who had written him love letters after the fact that came out, and then this article was published in the New York Daily News yesterday. Nope, today. Today is the 4th. Okay, this is part of the problem with working the night shift. I never know what day it is. And it says the case against movie industry pariah Harvey Weinstein for an alleged 2004 attack on an aspiring actress may be in jeopardy after Manhattan prosecutors uncovered discrepancies in her story, the Daily News has learned. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office charged the Miramax founder with sex crimes related to 3 women, including former actress Lucia Evans. Evans said she was in college trying to break into acting when Weinstein forced her to perform a sex act in his Tribeca office, but at least one of the charges, the count of criminal sex act pertaining to Evans, may be falling apart after prosecutors disclosed to Weinstein's side that information contained in a personal log kept by the 36-year-old accuser contradicts her story. So her own journal contradicts her story. Sources said. The DA's office may not be able to move forward with the count, which carries up to 25 years behind bars, sources said. So this is the second one. There's 2 now that have accused him. Now, this is not to say that necessarily all of Harvey Weinstein's accusers are lying. There's been at least one accuser that had evidence to back her accusation. She had a recording. And there's another one that has come out, and there's a video of her in his office that shows that, you know, that he was going to come on to women that came into his, or I guess he came into her office or whatever, but he was going to come on to women that he was working with. But at the same time, there was a dynamic there. He asked if it was okay to flirt, and she didn't say, you know, no, I'm not okay with this. She hedged, and that was one of the problems that I've noted with this case, that it's not cut and dried. It looks like a lot of the Weinstein problem was he had boundary issues, but the women that he worked with also didn't want to try to enforce their boundaries. Now, a low-level woman in the industry might not have been in a position to feel like she could have. But he also worked with women that were big actresses who are complaining that they didn't get to enforce their boundaries either. And there comes a point where you develop enough of a reputation and you develop enough power in your own career that you ought to be able to come forward and say, you know what, I can do this without you. I am enforcing my boundaries, and you have a problem, and this is what it is. And this behavior is unacceptable. Stop it. And nobody did. Nobody did until a reporter started covering the story. And now there's, you know, all these accusers coming out. And it turns out some of them are engaging in that, you know, rewriting history thing that you do with your memory.
Yeah, it's a really tricky thing, though. I am actually going to make a video about this in terms of consent in porn, because on one hand, when you do work with directors and producers, you do want to maintain a relationship with them to, you know, further your career, to get opportunities, to not be seen as difficult. So you will not enforce your boundaries. And you should understand that that is a hit you are taking willingly because you want the reward that is on the other side. Or you do enforce your boundaries and take the hit of not having the opportunities, because they are mutually exclusive. I think with the whole Me Too thing is started, of course, with Weinstein, as you were saying. And since we're on that topic, I think the biggest issue around that is, aside from the people who were, you know, personally actually involved, who do have proof of being victimized, I think we have another level of victimization that is happening based on the hysteria around it. And I think feminism is victimizing women. I think Me Too hashtag is victimizing women. As you watch the Jess Butcher TED Talk, she mentions how there's girls who are 12, 13 years old who have never ever experienced any kind of sexual assault, but they have anxiety and dread and depression about the world because they fear that will happen to them. And there's this awesome article by former cam girl Ayala, who wrote about her own experience growing up in a very strict, abusive, Christian homeschool type of environment. And she believed that was the way she grew up was normal until she started talking to people about her experiences. And she wrote this great thing I linked, but I'll use an excerpt from it where she talked with the Me Too campaign. I felt a pressure to view the things that had happened to me as part of the systemic abuse narrative, as important somehow, as something I should be more upset about. What was wrong with me for being so unaffected by sexual assault? Should I get more angry or whatever assault? The idea of offering up my experience as part of the cause felt sort of appealing, like it granted me special status within a storyline. And the problem here is that if I did choose to label my experiences as something important and troubling, that I would become unhappier and more fearful. People who view their experiences important and troubling seem to also have a lot of distress associated with it. And there's more, but she essentially says that she wishes that there was at least one single person who did not react with horror to things that she mentioned during her childhood. And as she started, every single person she interacted with was like, are you okay? How are you coping? And as she was integrating in a broader culture, she started to feel a gaping wound in her soul that wasn't there before. She felt injustice and crippling rage. She suffered through nightmares. She defined herself as a victim and felt like a victim. And that started only after other people made her feel special in a sense of a victim of some horror. And she wishes at least one single person didn't treat her like a victim and instead didn't buy into some sort of greater idea of abuse, but listened to her and listened to her experience and listened to her saying that it wasn't that big of a deal. It's just something she thought was part of normal life, so it didn't really affect her. If people were more like that about her experiences, she wouldn't have this pain. And I just thought that was a really, really powerful article to bring up how easily or how much we can be influenced by other people's perceptions of our experiences and start to take on a pain that wasn't there before.
You want to know something hilarious though. When you talk about how feminists abuse women, we had an example of that just this week with Steven Crowder setting up a table at Texas Christian University, I believe it was, with the sign saying, "Rape culture is a myth, change my mind." Right? And his mere presence there, essentially inviting people to come and convince him that rape culture is really a thing. And I know, and everybody knows, that he's not interested in being convinced, but he wants them to articulate their position, right? And so there he is sitting at the table. There was a woman who came up, the first person who came up to him, freaked out. She got absolutely furious with him. Then she burst into tears, and then she called campus police over and tried to get them to remove him, and then screamed at them that she was a rape victim, and if they didn't remove him, they were, essentially saying her rape doesn't matter and blah blah blah, right? Okay, that's
such a common argument.
Yeah.
And what a straw man.
Okay, but the campus police essentially told her, well, is he forcing you to participate? And she said no. And the cop said, well, then you're free to leave. And she said, well, if nobody else is going to challenge him on this, then I feel like I have to. And he says, but you're free to leave. And it's a public sidewalk. He has every right to be here. So essentially, after that incident, Texas Christian University put out a statement saying, Oh, God, on Twitter saying, today Steven Crowder chose to challenge our students on a public sidewalk in front of the university. While the Constitution gives him the right to express his views, the sentiments he expressed do not align with TCU's values. His views adversely affected many members of our campus community. The health and safety of the horned frog family is of utmost importance, and we encourage individuals to contact campus resources for support. Counseling.tcu. Blah blah blah.
I'm sorry, you lost me at horned frog, Karen.
That's their mascot. But okay, so here's my comment on this article that posted this tweet. Crowder, honestly, I just don't see how TCU promotes or tolerates the rape of women. TCU, how dare you suggest that this hallowed institution does not promote or tolerate the most egregious forms of sexual violation imaginable against the women under our care? You, sir, do not represent the views of this university, not one jot, not one tittle. If you continue to suggest that this school does not, in fact, condone and even encourage the vile and horrific rape of our female students, we will be forced to extend counseling services to help these women cope with the terrible and crushing possibility that their school is allegedly not a hotbed of brutal sexual violence against them. And if that doesn't work, we'll be forced to put these poor, naive young women into re-education so that they will be reassured that the people in charge of their educations and safety are indeed doing everything we can to ensure that they are sexually assaulted and that nothing will be done about it by any authority.
That's perfect. That is perfect. That's exactly what's going on. That's exactly what's going on. And feminists are actually, not all of them, obviously, but the ones that are promoting the rape culture narrative, they get upset about debate over the validity of the rape culture narrative, are essentially saying if women are not terrified, then women are being discriminated against. The natural state of women is to be told that we live in a society that does
hates
this,
us and violates us and doesn't care.
Yes, and it's an attack on women to ensure that women are not constantly terrified that they are about to be raped at any given moment. I did miss a couple of super chats. I want to catch up real quick.
Yeah, this will take just 2 seconds. I just want to point out that the rape thing is it's an automatic I win button. That's what they're upset about. They keep mashing the I win button, and it isn't eliciting the result that they want. So that's what the anger is about, not about I don't think women truly believe that we live in a dangerous place unless it suits them. I think what they're upset about is they can't win easily, can't automatically win anymore. It used to be, up until people like us came along, that as soon as you say rape, as you saw with Emmett Till, that's it. Instant I win, no matter what. Yeah. Not anymore.
Boy, it really pisses them off if they tell you, but I was an assault victim, I was a sexual assault victim, and you say, well, so was I. And I don't feel the same way about it you do. That just the meltdown that you get from that, or else if you're on Twitter and they just block you.
Well, 'cause
you just have internalized misogyny.
It was implanted.
Apparently, the rates are so bad that it's worse than war-torn countries.
Yes, 5 out of 4 women are raped before they get out the door in the morning. But our super chats. But my super chats. Albert Nada gave us $5 Canadian, and I missed the comment because he had 2. So I skipped over 2 different comments. So he gave us $5 Canadian and said, Karen, could you please pass on my North Country video to Steven Crowder? And then B Rex gave us $5 Canadian. I missed this one as well. And said, missed it last week, but wanted to say it's a myth that Hobby Lobby provides Viagra for ED. It doesn't. It does, however, provide most birth control. And actually, what it does is it pays for insurance that covers most birth control. It just doesn't cover abortifacients. So, and this was, as far as I'm concerned, the government telling your employer what perks they have to offer you. Screws things up between employers and employees, and when they come up with a minimum wage and when they come up with you must offer this insurance and these things and so on, what that does is it creates an expectation that is the bottom line, but it also creates an expectation for what will be the norm. And you get in a situation where you have a job market that is an employee's market, where employers are having to really compete for employees. You don't want to have a preset expectation because you want employers to be like, no, we'll give you this. Just come and work for us. We'll do anything. And if there's a standard, well, this is all they have to do. It's more likely that there will still be enough people willing to settle for it that it makes it harder for you to negotiate for better stuff. So on one hand, if you have a buyer's market for the employer and the employee has to take whatever they can get in those markets, it sucks that, you may end up with less because of that. But on the other hand, because they set that standard, when it becomes a buyer's market for the employee, you don't necessarily get better stuff than that. And it is because people just have this expectation. Well, it's normal for me to only get these things if I take this job. And I've watched my employer, they've had to start offering all kinds of incentives to get people to come and do the kind of job I do because people are intimidated by it, and it's not a lucrative job. It's the kind of job that you do more because you care about the particular topic, or because you are a caregiver. It's like your area of skill, or because you have some connection to the intellectual disabilities community. Like, you become aware of this because you've had a family member with an intellectual disability, or you become aware of this because you've had family that's worked with intellectual disabilities. You don't usually see people, you ask them what they want to do when they're in high school, say they want to become an individual caregiver for people with intellectual disabilities as their dream. They want to be a fireman, they want to be a CEO, they want to be an actor or an actress, or an athlete. So they're having to really fight to get people to come in and do the job that I do, because they can get all these other jobs now. It's a lot easier for people to find work, and they are offering incentives. And it's this idea that Hobby Lobby is the bad guy for not wanting to pay for insurance that covers abortifacients. I don't think people are necessarily specifically entitled to that detail. And at the other end of it, I think if employers didn't have a set, list of things, this is the norm, when they had to compete for employees, they would work harder to get people to come in and do jobs for their companies. And you would see a greater variety of companies listening to people who said, well, I would go work for a company, but I would be more likely to pick a company that's going to provide this. And if abortifacients are one of those things, then there will be more companies providing those. And it wouldn't matter whether Hobby Lobby did or not, because people who wanted them would just go work somewhere where they could get that. So that's my thing on that. I don't know, my co-host might agree or disagree, but I'm going.
I agree, but on different grounds.
No.
I agree that a closely held company, right, a family-owned company that is not publicly traded, that is owned by a family that has particular religious views, should be able to abstain from violating their religious principles. And frankly, the argument that, now there are all these women who are without their IUDs and their morning after pill. Well, no, because the government stepped in and provided those things, so that Hobby Lobby wouldn't have to. So
I just oppose the individual mandate to begin with. I actually have a funny story about how it's screwed up some companies where interns used to actually be able to work more than, or like up to 40 hours or even more than 40 hours where I work. But since the Obamacare thing went into effect, interns could only work 30 hours because after that they'd have to provide health care to them, even though they're interns.
Yeah.
It was like they want to do the work, but they can't because then we get in trouble with the law, and because government's getting in the way of companies doing business.
Well, the company that I worked for when Obamacare passed cut almost all of the employees that worked at the level I worked at, from the ones that had full-time, cut them down to part-time. But they didn't cut them down, from 40 hours to 20 hours. They cut them down from 40 hours to 32 hours. And they didn't cut them down from 5 days a week to 4 days a week, 4 8-hour shifts. No, they cut them down from 5 8-hour shifts to 5 7-hour shifts. So
yeah.
they worked just as much, just as hard, got paid 8 hours a week less money, and didn't get any new benefits. And that was, that was the gas station I worked at. This was done to most of my coworkers that had been working full time. So I saw stuff like that happen with. I also had coworkers that were on different aspects of welfare, not cash assistance, but food stamps, Medicaid, that kind of thing, that would not work over a certain number of hours a week, because if just 1 week they worked 1 hour longer than every other week, then the Job and Family Services Department would require them to have that many hours a week and every week, and basically treat them as if that was their regular income and reduce or eliminate their benefits based on it. So there's a lot of stuff that happens based on government mandates. When I say the government doesn't solve problems, I'm talking about experiences like that, things that I've seen like that. They didn't solve anything for any of those people. They just created hurdles for them to get over in their relationship with their employer that made it harder for them to survive financially. Every time the government tries to solve poverty, they create a problem for poor people and a problem for employers.
On it tangentially related to companies and paying and shit, people have been all happy about Amazon going ahead and on their own paying their employees $15 an hour or whatever. What people are ignoring is the fact that they got rid of the stock options that the employees used to have, and they got rid of like monthly bonuses. So basically, people who worked hard would get more money, and instead everybody's just going to be paid 15. So a lot of Amazon employees are actually going to be ending up paid less.
So it's communism.
Yeah. Well, there's another thing that happens too.
That's basically what I said. Yeah, no matter, like, because you can't get bonuses or anything, so it doesn't matter how hard you work within your 8 hours a day or whatever, or 40 hours a week or whatever your schedule is. I'm like, yeah, all that. Just imagine if the forcing increase in minimum wage in companies that don't want it to happen, what they're going to have to do.
Yeah, there's another thing that happens.
Especially restaurants.
They eliminate positions. They cut people's hours.
People don't realize how small profit margins are for certain companies. Industries.
Well, there's another thing. You go into a gas station and you see the cashier, doing a bunch of chores. They'll be mopping, they'll be making coffee, they'll be stocking shelves. They might even be in the cooler, putting things on the shelves in the cooler. Those requirements exist because nobody wants to pay somebody, what is it now, $8 or $9 an hour, depending on where you are, to just stand around behind a register and look stupid. And you do feel and look stupid if you are just standing there doing nothing. Nobody wants to pay somebody to not be productive. Well, and every time the minimum wage goes up, in addition to hours being cut, in addition to benefits being changed or cut, And in addition to positions being cut, they also increase that task list without increasing the amount of time during which you have to do those tasks. So, the more the government tries to solve poverty, the more they make the lives of people who work minimum wage jobs harder. That's my little spiel.
Hannah?
Yes.
Hannah?
We're getting close to the...
I have to go.
Okay. Well, we will say goodnight to Karen.
I'm going to say goodnight, and also I'm going to say watch that Louder with Crowder video, because oh my God, was it hilarious.
Well, and I'm going to remind you that super chat from Albert Nada said, please pass my North Country video on to Steven Crowder.
I will absolutely do that. If Albert Nada, if you send me a link to that in a email or a Twitter DM or something like that, so that I can have it and I don't have to go looking for it, because right now I didn't even think I was going to be able to be on the show tonight, and I'm going to probably be up until 2:00 in the morning getting things done that I need to get done.
Are you going on another radio show?
Yeah. No, I'm not going on another radio show. I have people booked to come in and do deep cleaning of my house, which means I have to declutter and tidy and remove the worst of the worst. They're coming at 9 in the morning, and this was not my idea. It was my man's idea, and I think he didn't realize how bad his office was, because I spent 5 hours in there today just sorting through his things and getting things to the point where people could actually get in there and scrub.
Yeah. I want to point out, Zerang says, pointed out, you have to follow people back on Twitter to send and receive DMs that you're going to see. So.
Oh, okay. So send me an email, girlwriteswhat@gmail.com.
I believe you can open your DMs, but then that's a problem.
There's two functions. I don't know how to do that. The other thing.
I don't know how to do it, and I'm not going to do it right now. But girlwriteswhat@gmail.com. If you forget that, Albert Nada, find it on the About page of my YouTube channel. And I'm going now. Good night, everybody.
Night, Karen.
This was fun.
We're talking to you again.
We will blink Karen out of the picture here if I can find there we go. Now there's an empty chair. So now people will be able to find where in the podcast she left. Karen has abandoned us. So we can all we all feel abandoned. We can make false allegations against her. That's one of the reasons they happen. So back to the super chats. We have Mr. Roboto gave us US $2. Oh no, wait, I already read that one. We have Miles Kinslow gave us US $10 and said, "Soon Me Too will become Bang Me Too. Bring on the alternatives, robots or other holes." Actually, if you're old, you grew up referring to the sign that everybody keeps calling the hashtag sign. That's the pound sign. Like press pound for more options, and so on your phone system and everything. That's the pound sign. So when you read it, it's pound me too.
Oh my God.
Yeah, my parents looked at the stuff that's been written about it, and they're seeing pound me too, and just laughing. Hoki Bukisa gave us US $5 and said the women getting with Weinstein weren't just getting economic benefit from it. Some of them get off on that dynamic of quid pro quo and being naughty. And there is something to say about that too. This is one of those debates that feminists hate. There's a degree to which women like men to take charge in a sex encounter because that also involves taking responsibility, and it means that the man is doing all of the I can't do it like Prim does it, but Emotional labor. It's easy.
That's
to
pretty
do.
accurate.
Well, my allergies
it was
help.
a good attempt.
But yeah, there's a lot of emotional labor that goes into initiating a sexual encounter. There's a lot of emotional labor that goes into asking people out. Men are aware of this because they're expected to do these things. Women that never try, women that are not the ones who hit on people they're interested in, but sit around and look pretty and wait for them to pound your door down. They don't realize what they are asking of men when they don't have any idea, except subconsciously they do, and they're avoiding it. And so there is a dynamic but that doesn't justify necessarily when someone is very obviously uncomfortable and pulling their arms in towards their chest and backing away from you and leaning away from you and that kind of thing, getting pushy. And women do that too. I've had women do that to me, and it's very upsetting. And you turn around and push back when a woman does it. But a lot of women, they fail to enforce those boundaries when they're dealing with a man. So yeah, there are women who get off on it, and not on being raped, but on playing with that dynamic. And feminists hate that debate because they can't acknowledge that there are women who behave that way without taking it as acceptance of treating women who don't behave that way as if they are behaving that way. If that makes sense. But Tyler Preston gave us $2 and said, I sent a super chat through Streamlabs. Did you see? No, I didn't. Actually, I don't know anything about Streamlabs. And apparently my computer thought it was very important right now to tell me that I should optimize my PC, and that's the sound you all just heard.
Well, theoretically, if you log into Streamlabs, it'll prompt you to log in with YouTube, which is what probably it is for Honey Badger. And you got to choose whichever account it is, and then it should be in the dashboard.
Right,
of it.
but I don't actually know any of our login or anything for that. I'll have to find that information out so that next time I will see super chats from Streamlabs. But nobody has actually said anything to me about Streamlabs. So,
curious.
Yeah, so I haven't seen it. Andrew, are you able to do that?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, if you do,
let me try.
Yeah, if you do, and you get to see it.
You know what? No, I don't think so because I'm only an admin.
No,
I'm not I don't have to log in for the.
Yeah, it depends if it's a Badger Streams login or the regular.
Yeah, no, I don't even. I don't have.
Okay.
That.
Well,
they could have sent it through Twitch as well.
Yeah, this is definitely something that. No, he said through super chat through Streamlabs.
Or you can basically with Streamlabs you can configure it so that when people if a donation or something, a little animation or whatever with words will pop up on the stream.
Okay.
If you have stream configured, so.
Well,
it has awesome overlays where you can get a running scroll of the recent donations and a little alert that'll say it.
So this is Streamlabs is like OBS.
Yeah, they have their own slobs.
Okay,
it's great. Streamlabs OBS slobs. I use it all the time for everything. It's exactly like OBS, but with all the widgets and features built in. It's freaking awesome. I love it.
Well, it sounds like something that I need to get into after the move. Because I'm not starting anything new until after the move, because moving is a pain. I haven't done it in over 10 years, so this is like we've got 10 years worth of stuff built up in this little apartment, and we're moving.
A ton of crap.
And it's all got to get organized and moved. So there's all that. But once that's done, and that'll be done, I think, by the end of October, then I'm going to look into the Streamlabs thing because it sounds good. But enough shilling for this thing that I don't even know anything about it yet. And we'll go to the last super chat we have so far. And that is, and for Bill, not a mansion. I'm moving into the money pit, essentially. We're gonna have a lot of work to do, but it'll be worth it in the end. French Honey Badger gave us US $5 and said real wage increases can only come through capital investments, which require savings. The government systematically destroys savings by printing money, and it becomes devalued then. Is the conclusion there? There's more of it. Each little bit of it is worth less. Has less buying power. Flooding the market. Our government, like I said, government doesn't solve problems. It creates problems, and if you are solving problems, it has two options. It can stay out of your way or get in your way. And guess which one it chooses most of the time. So, with that, I think, unless anybody has had anything they wanted to say about this issue that they didn't get to say because I kept interrupting with super chats.
It'll be curious to see what happens on Saturday.
Yeah,
it's okay.
Saturday.
We did our own interrupting of your interrupting, so it's okay.
Yeah, stop interrupting me while I'm interrupting you. This is badger interrupting. So, in any case...
Badgerrupting.
Yeah, badgerrupting. Is Saturday the vote?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
boy. And I'll be at my parents' house.
Yeah. Oh, boy, is right.
Yep, this will be fun. It'll be interesting, and I hope...
You have an interesting definition of fun.
Yeah. Oh, you have no idea. Why do you think I get into so many Twitter fights? And I am part Irish. Come on. But yeah, I can't wait to see what happens, and I hope it goes the way of recognition of due process, and I hope it goes the way of just handing a great big screw you to all of the people that are trying to get false accusations to be given that level of power, and that's my hope with it. As far as the left-right leanings of the nominee himself, at this point I don't care. But with that, I'd like to thank all of my co-hosts for being on the show. Sorry Karen didn't get to stick around long enough for me to thank her. She really did me a big favor by taking time to be on tonight. So thanks everybody for being on the show, and thanks everybody for listening to us rant about this. And again, thanks to everybody who is part of making Badger Talk, making HBR Talk happen. And good night, all.